What happens with our systems, Naren, is they have a way of degrading naturally. It's no one's fault. I believe it's an element of human nature that systems have a way of degrading, partly because there's a dynamic in place for all of us. I believe, we all have this to some degree, where we have the shiny object syndrome. Naren, you know about the shiny object syndrome?
Absolutely, Gary. I think.
How would you characterize that? How would you define the shiny object syndrome?
Yeah, we get excited about an idea. Let's say we go to an event and we hear an idea, or we even listen to a podcast and we hear an idea. Instead of thinking it through and looking at all the other things we have to also take care of, this now gets on the top of the list, and then we don't stick with it. We forget about it in a week or two.
Yeah.
So then it just
we get distracted by this shiny object over here.
Yeah.
And the distraction may be a wonderful distraction, but meanwhile, it has a subtle way of eroding other things that we have in place in the practice, because our attention is over here now instead of on the fundamentals. And let's face it, systems are fundamentals. They aren't necessarily sexy. They're not necessarily things that they're important, very important. But they're not necessarily they fit the definition of the shiny new object, but they're very, very important. So here's my suggestion. As you put these 24 systems in place in your practice, a good pace would be to, if you were to say, come back to your team and say, hey, we're going to put all these in our practice in the next month, I can pretty much assure you the wheels will fall off because you'll be overwhelming. But a good pace would be to introduce 2 systems a month. 2 systems a month. That's a fairly quick pace, because at the end of the year, you'd have all 24 systems in place. But it's also not so intense that it's going to cause the wheels to fall off. But then when you get all 24 systems in place, I want you to do an ongoing systems recalibration. And the way I would kind of frame this for you, you're all probably familiar with the Golden Gate Bridge out in San Francisco. We're all familiar with that. Here's something you might not know. There is a permanent crew of 12 painters whose job is to permanently paint the Golden Gate Bridge. Naren, they start at a certain point and they work their way around. And remember, the elements are harsh out there. Salt water, intense sun, wind. And so that paint is constantly being eroded. And as they work their way around the bridge, they get it all painted, and then at some point they get back to where they started. And guess what they do then? They repaint the bridge again. So they're on a permanent project of painting that bridge. Well, that's what you need, how you need to look at your systems. You can't simply put these 24 systems in place and set them and forget them, because they will evaporate. So think about being on the painting crew of the Golden Gate Bridge, and that's how you're going to do these systems. So in the first year, when you get them in place, what I want you to do every year thereafter is audit 2 of those systems, maybe in the same order that you put them in place, and then make any changes you need to, recalibrate them, dial them back in so they're calibrated ideally. And what the audit is, and the recalibration exercise is compare what you're currently doing against ideal and make any changes that you need to make to bring it back to ideal. And that's the process of calibrating your systems. And if you do 2 a month, it's very manageable. Those could be done during your team meetings. They could be done, also during those semi-annual meetings. And they can be simply fitted into the agenda of those meetings. And lo and behold, you'll have 24 systems that are always calibrated. Now you'll have a team that's fully calibrated and is really a high performance team running systems that are now calibrated, and now you'll have high performance systems.